Have you ever felt a connection with an animal so deep it defies explanation? A look in their eyes that seems to hold a secret, a story you can't quite grasp. We tell ourselves it's just instinct, we rationalize it. But what if it's more? What if sometimes they are the messengers for a story that has no other voice? Today, we have a story about a promise that refused to die, a secret buried for 3 long years, and a messenger who walked out of the fog to deliver it. A messenger who just happened to be a dog. Before we begin, do me a favor. Think of a pet you love or have loved. Picture them. Now, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will change the way you see that bond forever. The fog comes for the Oregon coast like a thief in the night. It steals the horizon, muffles the sound of the world, and leaves behind a cold, damp silence. At 0500 hours at the Mountain Air National Guard Base, that silence was everything. It was in the beads of condensation on the razor wire fence. It was in the ghostly shapes of the PJ's helicopters sitting on the tarmac waiting for a mission that wasn't coming. For 72 agonizing hours, 4 Army Corps engineers had been missing somewhere in the treacherous tangle of the Mountain National Forest, and the relentless weather had grounded every search effort. Hope was a flickering candle in a hurricane. And then, out of the gray nothingness, a shape emerged. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a vehicle. It was a dog. An old yellow Labrador, his coat caked with the kind of mud that speaks of miles and misery. He limped heavily, his back right leg held just off the ground, each step a testament to a deep, abiding pain. But it wasn't his limp that made the young airman at the gate freeze. It wasn't even the old faded scars that mapped his face. It was what he carried in his mouth. He wasn't barking or whining or showing any sign of distress. He was just determined. Between his teeth, held with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a jaw that strong, was a tarnished brass geological compass. He walked to the gate, stopped, and with a quiet dignity lowered his head and placed the compass on the asphalt. He didn't drop it. He placed it. Then he nudged it forward with his nose, lifted his head, and looked the airman right in the eye. The message was clear. This is for you. Now follow me. Inside the ready room, the atmosphere was thick with frustration. Master Sergeant Elias Vance, a man whose face was a roadmap of 20 years in pararescue, stared at a topographical map that had become his enemy. "There's nothing," he said to his team, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "We've got no signal, no heat signatures, nothing. It's like they vanished off the face of the earth." Staff Sergeant Lena Petrova, his lead medic, was cleaning her gear with a sharp, precise anger. "We should be out there, Elias. Ground pounders. Something. And do what Lena get another team lost in that soup." That's when the call came from the gate. An unusual situation. When Vance Petrova and the team's rookie airman, Sam "Rook" Jones, arrived, they saw it for themselves. The old lab hadn't moved. He just sat waiting his breath, pluming in the cold air. Rook, barely 20, just stared. "Sarge, is that—" Vance knelt his joints, protesting. He didn't reach for the dog. He looked at the compass. He recognized the type. It was standard issue for Army engineers. He looked at the dog's eyes. They were old, cloudy with age, but they held a focus and intelligence that made the hair on his arms stand up. "It's a stray," Petrova said, her voice laced with skepticism. "Probably sick. Could be a biohazard. We need to call animal control." "Animal control didn't bring us a compass, Petrova," Vance said, his eyes never leaving the dog's. "This dog did. Think about that for a second. We've all heard those incredible stories, right? The dog that pulls a toddler from a burning house, the cat that alerts its owner to a gas leak. It happens. It's a documented phenomenon, animals acting as guardians, as messengers. But almost always, they're acting to save their own family, their own pack. This was different. This dog was a stranger. He was injured, exhausted, and old. He had every reason to be curled up somewhere nursing his wounds. Instead, he walked an unknown distance through hostile terrain, to a place full of noise and strange smells to deliver a message to a group of complete strangers. This is where instinct and logic collide. The logical part of your brain, the part Petrova was listening to, says it's a coincidence, a fluke. But the other part, that older, quieter part of your soul that Elias Vance had learned to trust in the mountains of Afghanistan, that part knows. It knows that the most important messages we ever receive often arrive in the most unexpected ways. The real question is, are we quiet enough? Are we brave enough to actually listen to them? "What are you thinking, Sarge?" Rook asked, his voice barely a whisper. Vance stood up slowly. He looked at the oppressive wall of fog hanging over the forest. He looked at his team, their faces a mixture of doubt and desperation. And then he looked back at the old broken dog who held the gaze of a five-star general. "I'm thinking our search just got a new lead," Vance said, a decision solidifying in his voice. He turned to the gate guard. "Open it." Petrova started to object. "Elias, we can't base a mission on a stray dog." Protocol. Protocol got us a warm room and 4 missing men. Vance cut her off, his voice sharp but not cruel. "He's not just a stray. He's a messenger. And right now, he's the only thing we've got." He took a step forward, and the old Labrador seemed to understand. The dog rose his legs, trembling from the effort, and gave a single soft woof. It wasn't a bark. It was an acknowledgement. Finally. "Let's go." He turned, and without a second glance to see if they were following, he limped back toward the fog, a silent commander leading his new squad into the Ghost Mountain. The mission was on, and nothing could have prepared them for the secret that dog had been guarding for 3 long years. They called it the Ghost Mountain for a reason. The moment they were off the access road and under the canopy of the ancient Douglas firs, the world changed. The air grew still and heavy, tasting of damp earth and decay. Sunlight struggled to pierce the dense ceiling of green, casting the forest floor in a perpetual twilight. Every sound was magnified. The snap of a twig under Rook's boot sounded like a rifle shot, the drip of water from a fern frond like a ticking clock. This wasn't just a forest. It was a cathedral of secrets. The dog who Rook had started calling Buddy moved with a grim determination. His limp was severe, and with every few steps he'd stumble a quiet whimper escaping his throat. But he never stopped. He'd just shake his massive head, push himself back up, and continue his slow, agonizing pace, leading them through treacherous ravines and over slick, moss-covered rocks that their maps marked as impassable. Petrova, ever the professional, was tracking their route on a ruggedized tablet. "His path makes no sense, Elias," she muttered into her comms, her voice a tight whisper. "He's taking us in a spiral deeper into the unstable zone. Landslide risk is over 80% here." "He's not looking at a map, Lena," Vance replied, his eyes locked on the dog's tail. "He's following a memory." An hour into the trek, just as the team's skepticism was reaching a breaking point, Buddy stopped. He stood over a low-hanging branch of a cedar tree. Draped over it like a deliberate offering was a torn piece of high-visibility orange fabric. It was from a surveyor's vest, but there was something wrong with it, something deeply unsettling. Petrova knelt, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. "This wasn't ripped off in a fall," she said, her voice dropping an octave. She pointed to the edge. "Look, it's been cut, cleanly, and it's been tied to the branch with a taut-line hitch." She looked up at Vance, her professional mask cracking for the first time. "That's a sailor's knot, a specialized one. This wasn't a cry for help, Elias. This was a message, a warning." Suddenly, the forest didn't just feel empty. It felt watchful. The stakes had just changed. The 4 engineers weren't just lost to the elements. They were pawns in someone else's game. They were being herded, and now, so was the rescue team. This is a critical moment in any crisis, the moment you realize your tools and your training are based on the wrong assumptions. Think about it. In our own lives, how often do we face a problem with a map that's completely wrong that rely on our modern technology, our plans, our logical conclusions? But what happens when the problem isn't logical? What happens when the rules you thought you were playing by don't apply? For the team, that moment came when Petrova's tablet suddenly flickered and died. GPS is down, she announced, a new urgency in her tone. Massive magnetic interference, probably from the iron deposits in these rocks, or something else. Rook's voice, already strained, cracked a little. Or something else. What does that mean? What if we're the ones being led into a trap, Sarge? What if the dog is just part of it? It was a fair question, the kind of question that keeps a soldier alive. But Vance was watching Buddy. The dog hadn't even looked at the vest. His gaze was fixed deeper in the woods, his body coiled like a spring, a low, guttural growl rumbling in his chest for the first time. He wasn't afraid, he was angry. "Look at him, Rook," Vance said quietly. "That's not a decoy. That's a guardian. Our tech is useless here. Our map is a lie. Right now, he's the only compass we have." He paused, then added, "Sometimes the oldest maps aren't made of paper, but of memory and loyalty." Trusting that old map, Vance gave the order to press on, moving deeper into the magnetic anomaly, deeper into the silence. They moved, single-file weapons ready, their $1 million of sophisticated gear now feeling like dead weight. Their survival now rested on the 4 paws of a creature driven by a ghost they couldn't see. And that's when Rook, on point, stopped dead. He didn't say a word. He just slowly raised a hand, his face pale. Vance moved up beside him and looked down. Hidden under a thin layer of leaves and pine needles was a tripwire tied to a series of hanging logs upstream. It wasn't a lethal trap. It was an alarm. A cage. They hadn't just stumbled into someone's territory. They had just walked into the opening move of a calculated, intelligent, and very human labyrinth. And the architect of this maze was now fully aware that they were here. So, you've just walked into a trap. The rules of a search and rescue mission are gone. This isn't about finding lost men anymore. It's about surviving a predator. But this is no animal. The precision of the knots, the cleverness of the trap. This is the work of a brilliant, patient, and very human mind. The most dangerous kind of mind, there is one with nothing left to lose. As Vance's team disabled the tripwire, they all felt it. The Ghost Mountain wasn't just haunted by memories. It was guarded by one. Buddy, the old Labrador, didn't lead them around the traps. He led them through them, sniffing out each hidden wire and pressure plate with an unnerving accuracy, as if he knew the mind of the man who built this maze. The path ended abruptly at a clearing choked with weeds. In the center, half swallowed by ivy and rust, stood a concrete monolith, an abandoned Cold War listening post, a relic from an era of silent, invisible warfare. Its satellite dish, frozen and skeletal, was pointed at the gray sky like a desperate, unanswered prayer. A low, metallic groan echoed from within the structure. It was the surveyors. They were close. As the team approached, a voice, thin and distorted, crackled to life from an old intercom speaker above a reinforced steel door. "Protocol breach," the voice hissed. "Contingency Alpha is now active. Identify yourselves, foreign agents." There, standing on a rusted catwalk above them, was a man who looked like a ghost himself. Gaunt, with a wild beard and eyes that burned with a feverish intensity, he wore the tattered remains of a government technician's uniform. This was Silas, and this was his kingdom. "We're a National Guard rescue team," Vance broadcasted back, his voice calm and steady. "We're here for the surveyors. Open the door, Silas." A dry, rattling laugh echoed from the speaker. "A clever disguise, but the frequency analysis of your comms is sloppy. You cannot deceive the gatekeeper. The secrets of Mountridge are not for you." The team realized the horrifying truth. The 4 engineers were trapped behind that steel door, and their captor wasn't a madman, or at least not just a madman. He was a protector, a soldier still fighting a war that had ended decades ago. Buddy, ignoring Silas completely, was at the bunker door, sniffing frantically at the seams and letting out a low, persistent growl. He wasn't growling at the ghost on the catwalk. He was growling at the lack of air seeping from the door. He knew the real enemy was time. Silas had sealed them inside a communications bunker designed to be airtight, and the door was secured with a lock that made no sense. A complex keypad connected to a vintage teletype machine that was clattering away, printing strings of numbers. It wasn't a combination lock, it was a cryptographic puzzle. This is the kind of enemy you can't defeat with force. How do you fight a ghost in his own machine? This is a battle that so many of us face, not in a forest, but in our own lives. We encounter people locked in their own pain, their own past, and our usual methods, logic, anger, force, are useless. You can't break down a door that only exists in someone's mind. You have to find the key. And Vance knew that. While his team was looking for ways to breach the door, he was studying the man. He listened to Silas's paranoid ramblings about protecting the data and enemy signals, and he began to piece together a tragic story. Silas wasn't just a former cryptographer. He was the last one. When the Cold War ended, the government decommissioned Mountridge. They packed up, turned off the power, and left. They left Silas behind with a lifetime of purpose that had vanished overnight. So his mind, in a profound act of self-preservation, created a new war. The birds became enemy drones, hikers became foreign spies, and the silence of the mountain became a secret he was sworn to protect. He wasn't evil. He was a soldier whose war was over, but whose mind never got the message to stand down. He's not protecting the bunker, he's protecting his past, Vance said to Petrova. The puzzle isn't a lock, it's a test, a loyalty test. Using details from Silas's own monologue, a date he kept repeating, a call sign he mentioned, Vance began to work the puzzle. It was a battle of wits, a conversation across time, with a man whose mind was a labyrinth of forgotten codes. As he worked, the teletype clattered the air in the bunker grew thinner, and Buddy's growls grew more desperate. Finally, Vance found it. The key wasn't a number, it was a phrase. The official motto of the old listening station. He spoke it into his radio. Silentium est aurum. Silence is golden. For a moment there was nothing. Then a loud clank echoed through the clearing. The heavy steel door hissed open. The surveyors were inside, shaken and low on oxygen, but alive. As Petrova and Rook rushed in, Vance looked up at the catwalk. Silas wasn't fighting. He was just standing there looking defeated, broken. His war was finally over. The lesson was brutal and clear. The most dangerous prisons aren't made of steel bars, but of a mind trapped in the past. As the team led a docile Silas out, something extraordinary happened. The paranoid, feverish light in his eyes flickered and cleared for a brief moment. He looked past the soldiers, past the helicopters, now descending through the fog, and his gaze landed on Buddy. A flash of recognition of a memory from a different time crossed his face. He stopped, looked at the old dog, and said with a shocking, heartbreaking clarity, "You're still here. You're still waiting for him, aren't you?" And with that one question, the entire mission turned on its head. The mystery of the 4 lost engineers was solved, but a much older, deeper mystery had just begun. Who was Buddy waiting for? The world outside the ghost mountain was coming back to life. The rhythmic thumping of helicopter blades sliced through the fog as the rescued surveyors were prepped for evac. The mission was by all accounts a success, a zero-defect operation. But for Vance, it felt unfinished. He couldn't shake Silas's words. Who was him? While Petrova tended to the engineers, Vance made a call. He gave the base a description of the dog and the location. "Run a cross-check," he ordered. "Missing persons reports, animal control logs, anything in this sector from the last 5 years involving a yellow lab." The answer came back in minutes, and it hit the team like a physical blow. 3 years ago, a renowned botanist, Dr. Eris Thorne, had been reported missing during a sudden catastrophic landslide in this exact region. He was an expert on rare flora and often camped for weeks at a time. The search had been massive but fruitless. Dr. Thorne was declared dead, and the report had one final heartbreaking detail with him. At the time of the landslide was his 7-year-old yellow Labrador, his research partner and constant companion. A dog named Buddy. He was never found, presumed buried alongside the man who loved him, until today. As the first helicopter began its ascent, the team called for Buddy to load up. But the old dog refused. He stood, looked back at the dark, silent forest, and let out a soft, pleading bark. He then turned and trotted towards a thick wall of rock and ivy, looking back over his shoulder at Vance. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, a final piece of the puzzle he needed to share. "Go," Petrova urged Vance. "We've got this. Go see what he wants." Vance followed Buddy away from the noise and chaos to a place that felt sacred. The dog led him to a sheer rock face where a thin waterfall cascaded down like a silver veil. Buddy didn't hesitate. He pushed right through the curtain of water and vanished. Heart-pounding, Vance followed him into the darkness. Behind the waterfall was a small, dry cave, sheltered from the world. In the center was a flattened bed of pine needles and dried leaves, a place where a body had rested for a very, very long time. And next to it, leaning against the cave wall, as if its owner had just set it down, was a weathered research pack. Kneeling, Vance slowly unzipped it. Inside, wrapped in an oilskin cloth, was a waterproof journal. His hands trembling, he opened it to the last entry. The handwriting was weak scrawled, but the words were immortal. The narrator's voice becomes slow, filled with emotion, as if reading the entry aloud. October 12th. I think this is the date. The sky is dark again. My legs, I can't feel them anymore. The landslide was so fast. One moment the world was green and full of life. The next it was just pressure and darkness. My buddy, he dug me out. He dragged me here. My brave, foolish boy. He won't leave me. I've screamed at him to go to save himself, but he just licks my hand and curls up beside me, his warmth the only thing keeping the cold out. He brings me berries, a fish he caught in the stream. I can't eat. He doesn't understand. He just knows his man is hurt, and he is here to help. The nights are the hardest. The pain is considerable. But he lays his big, stupid head on my chest, and I listen to him breathe, and it's enough. It's more than enough. He's all I have left of the light. This will be my last entry. My strength is gone. He knows it, I think. He hasn't left my side in an hour. He just watches me with those eyes, those damn beautiful, loyal eyes. If by some miracle someone finds this, don't mourn for me. Just know that I was not alone at the end. And please, please tell the world that my buddy was the best of us. Tell them he never left me. Vance closed the journal. He looked at the old dog who was now lying on the dirt floor, his head resting on his paws, watching him with those same eyes. And in that moment, everything clicked into place with devastating clarity. For 3 years, this dog hadn't just been a stray surviving in the wild. He had been a guardian keeping a vigil at his master's unofficial grave. The rescue mission leading them to the surveyors. It wasn't random. It was an extension of a promise made in this very cave. It was the last command of a dying man to help. We've all heard the stories, haven't we? Hachiko, the Japanese Akita, who waited for his owner at a train station for 9 years after his owner's death. The countless dogs photographed lying on their owners' graves. We call it instinct, but looking at Buddy Vance knew it was something more. It was a conscious choice, a love so profound it refused to acknowledge the boundary of death itself. This is the lesson that lies at the heart of this story, a truth that echoes in that silent cave. Love doesn't end with a final breath. It becomes a promise to watch over, to protect, and to remember. True loyalty has no expiration date. Buddy had kept his promise. He had stayed. He had remembered. And now, by saving 4 other men, he had finally told the world his master's story. His mission was complete. The only question left was, what happens to a hero when his long war is finally over? What do you do when a hero's war is over, when the promise has been kept and the long vigil is done? For Buddy, a dog who had lived for 3 years as a ghost in his own grief, the answer was not to forget, but to learn to live again. The story of what he did, of the journal, and of Dr. Eris Thorne's final words spread through Mountainridge Air National Guard Base like a sacred text. The tough, battle-hardened men and women of the Pararescue Unit people, who dealt in the stark realities of life and death, were brought to their knees by a love that refused to die. There was no question of sending Buddy to a shelter. That was never on the table. He wasn't a stray, he was a veteran. He was one of them. The team formally adopted him, his ownership papers signed by every member of the unit. The old creaky kennel at the back of the hangar was replaced overnight by a custom-built house with an orthopedic bed for his aging joints. He had a home. The physical changes were remarkable. Regular meals and Petrova's expert medical care put weight back on his frail body. The limp in his back leg, a painful reminder of his long ordeal, began to fade with therapy. His once mud-caked yellow coat began to shine with the luster of spun gold. He was, by all measures, a different dog. He would chase a tennis ball thrown by Rook with the goofy enthusiasm of a puppy, or lie contentedly at Vance's feet in the ready room, a steadying, silent presence during the long hours of waiting. But his eyes were the same. They were old and wise, and they held the memory of the mountain. They saw it in the way he would comfort a young airman after a tough mission, resting his head on their knee as if he could sense their invisible wounds just as he had sensed his master's. They saw it in the way he became the unofficial greeter for every returning helicopter, standing by the tarmac, his tail giving a slow, steady thump, a silent welcome home that meant more than any medal. And every evening, as the sun would set and paint the Oregon sky in shades of orange and purple, Elias Vance would find Buddy sitting on a small bluff at the edge of the base. The dog would be looking out past the fences and the runways towards the dark, silent silhouette of the ghost mountain. He wasn't sad. He wasn't mourning. He was remembering. He was honoring his promise, a silent salute to the man who had taught him what it meant to be loyal. This is the ultimate lesson of survival, isn't it? It's not just about enduring the trauma. It's about finding a new purpose on the other side of it. The surveyors would heal from their ordeal. Silas, the broken cryptographer, was finally getting the help he had needed for decades, beginning a long journey back from the prison of his own mind. And Buddy, the ultimate survivor, had found a way to transform his profound grief into a profound gift of service. He had turned his loyalty to one man into a loyalty for all who wore the uniform. He was no longer the ghost of the mountain. He was its guardian. In the end, we often think that we are the ones who rescue animals. We open our homes and our hearts and believe we are the heroes of their story. But sometimes, if we are very, very lucky, they are the ones who rescue us. They rescue us not just from mountains and forests, but from our own loneliness, from our own cynicism, and from our own forgetting. They remind us how to be loyal when the world feels faithless. They remind us how to love unconditionally when it feels like everything comes with a price. They remind us of the simple, powerful, and life-altering promise to simply stay. Buddy's story is a testament to that promise. If it touched your heart, if it made you think of that special animal in your own life, then please help us share it. Hit that subscribe button and join our community so we can continue to bring you stories that matter, stories that remind us of the incredible good that exists in this world. And in the comments below, we want to hear from you. Don't be shy. Tell us, what is the name of an animal that changed your life? Let's fill this comment section with the names of the guardians, the messengers, and the loyal friends who have made our world a better place. Thank you for listening. And never ever underestimate the power of a promise kept.